Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. Today, if you are a freshman music major in this room, you should not be here. Although you are welcome, you were supposed to be in room 3029 today. Students here at the School of Music have expressed an interest in learning about entrepreneurship in their music studies. What is that? Let's define entrepreneurship as the creation or extraction of economic value. So according to the report, the U.S. Music Industry's Jobs and Benefits by Robert Stoner and Jessica Dutra of Economist Incorporated, the music industry creates $170 billion in value annually in the U.S., supports 2.47 million jobs across a wide variety of professions, and accounts for $9 billion in export sales. As people who want to work in the industry of music and the industries surrounding it, we want to hear and learn from those who are able to create or extract value from the industry. And as students of music, it's important that you begin to position yourself to do the same right now. We've arranged for a variety of guest speakers to speak about their own journey and to give their best advice about how you might best prepare yourselves for your own careers. Each speaker brings a unique point of view to the series, and it should be recognized that their path may not be parallel to the one you will take. However, I believe common threads can be found in all their success stories. It's my hope that you will find a pattern in these threads and find inspiration to weave them into your own path towards success, both during and after your studies here at Georgia Southern. So I'd like to introduce Andrew Grabowska, an American sound designer for video games. He crafts evocative soundscapes to synergize with the gameplay, story, and mood of visual media. In 2016, Andrew graduated with an interdisciplinary studies degree in music, music industry, and film at Minnesota State University, Mankato. In 2017, he spent 6 months studying video game design at Hahn University in Arnhem, the Netherlands, where he worked as the sound team lead, sound designer, and composer for the game Tava, Trials of the Sun God. He acquired a master's degree in music technology at Georgia Southern University in 2020, where he also worked as a graduate teaching assistant, teaching Introduction to Music Technology and Digital Audio Workstation courses. Andrew currently works as a sound designer at Riot Games on the game League of Legends. Andrew has a love for music in the marching arts, frequently arranging for pep band and marching band, as well as teaching touring marching bands and drum and bugle corps throughout the summer. Please welcome to our guest speaker series, Andrew Grabowska. Thank you, Andrew, for being here.
Hello. Thank you. I've never heard anyone read my bio before, so that was very exciting. It's good to be here, good to see you all. And this is such a fun set of talks that you've arranged, so I'm really glad that I get to be a part of this. And it's particularly exciting because I feel like I'm one of those threads where I started out in music and have found something that's peripheral to it in kind of a unique way. So I made a presentation today. It may not be very exciting, but I'm going to do my best to make it sound thrilling. But it's kind of a story of my journey and how I found my place today here in Los Angeles. So let's kick it off. So about me, my name is Andrew Grabowska. Some of you may know me because I went to Georgia Southern and studied with Dr. Thompson here, our great host. I'm originally from Minnesota, a small town called St. Clair. And I went to school there, middle school, high school, elementary school, all those things. I think I had a graduating class of 42 or 43 people. It's pretty small. And who knew that I would end up, oh wait, I'm gonna back up. It's Minnesota, so I'm gonna show you my nice family here in this gigantic snowman that we put together. So it's pretty snowy, not quite like Georgia for the most part, but that's the good old Minnesota life. But who knew that I would end up in the big city in Los Angeles, which is where I am today, on the other side of the country. Very funny, because I started in Minnesota and then went to Georgia, and then flew all the way over to Los Angeles, so Midwest, and then to both coasts. So I studied, this is my connection to you all. I studied at Georgia Southern, and I got a Master of Music in Music Technology. I studied with Dr. Thompson here. And today I work at Riot Games out in Los Angeles as a sound designer. So to talk a little bit about me, I work on video games, so I had to share what some of my favorite video games are. Maybe this will resonate with some of you if you play some video games. But here I've got some pictures up. Hollow Knight, one of those classic Metroidvanias that is excellent. Metroid Prime, probably the founding game of Metroidvanias. It's in the title, I guess, along with Castlevania. Super Smash Bros., which is a game I'd play with my brothers growing up. It's one of those multiplayer games that's highly competitive, and I was never very good at it. My older brother would always win. But if I got close, that's when it was exciting. Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, which is a game that if you want to play a game for like the incredible audio, that's the game to check out. So if you're interested in just hearing something that you've never heard before, Hellblade is where it's at. They use some really cool binaural recording, so that everything feels very 3D spatialized. It's very cool. Pokemon Emerald, which was probably the first game that I played way too many hours of, maybe 500 hours or so as a child, over years probably. Lots of that game. Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, probably the most iconic for me as a child. Like, you hear the sound effects today, and it's just like, it kicks off that nostalgia in your brain. The music, the sounds. There's something about that game that just like has stuck with me. Maybe some of you have had this experience too, where you'll hear somebody's ringtone and it'll be a jingle from one of your favorite games, and you're like, oh, I know that, and you're like, it's just something that sticks with you. Mass Effect, I played this in my undergrad. College, my older brother had played it first, and he loved it, and I was like, oh, I'll give it a try. And I got way too into it, where suddenly school became the game. You got to score those A's, and then the game became like life. You're going on these adventures and you're making friends and teammates and things. It was very dramatic, but that was my undergrad years. Luigi's Mansion, a classic spooky game where you suck up ghosts. I don't know, something about it's very charming. Also, the music and sound design in that game, don't know what it is, but it's stuck with me. Tunic, which is a brand new game that's inspired by the Zelda games, but it had this focus on tell the players nothing. And it's just a game about you figuring everything out on your own. It actually, in the game has like a booklet that would tell you the controls and things, and you find each page as you play the game, trying to learn how to play the game by playing it. It's pretty cool. And then I put League of Legends here, which was a huge part of my high school and college years. I played lots and lots of League of Legends, and I can't not put it on here because I also work on this game, of course. So I'm going to include a few of my favorite champions in League of Legends. The first one at the top in the bluish color is Kindred. And then to the right is a character named Jhin. And then at the bottom is Bard. So if you play any League of Legends, you'll know who these characters are. So let's back up to the beginning of my journey. How did I get where I am today? How did I start? Well, it pretty much started with marching band, which may seem very different from video game sound design. But this is where I really discovered my passion for music. I grew up playing music with my family, so I had, some music background. I learned piano in 3rd grade and learned saxophone in grade school. 5th grade, played that in the band. And in around, I think, 10th grade, I joined a marching band for the first time, and it was the Mankato Area 77 Lancers marching band. And they are a street marching band, so they perform on the road, but like a field type of show where we have the drill and everything. I think it's pretty unique to Minnesota, and there's a whole competitive circuit and everything. And that's where I discovered my love of music. And it really surprised me because I came from this tiny school where I thought I was this amazing saxophone player. And I show up to this big marching band that had people from all over the place. And suddenly I was this tiny fish in this huge pond of people who are very good at what they do. And at first it was intimidating, but then you realize that when you're surrounded by people who are really good at something you want to be good at, that's the perfect environment for you to grow and become better at your craft. And that's where I flourished. I loved this marching band. I grew in my skills as a musician, but also as a person, developed lots of really great lasting friendships. It was just this ideal environment to help me grow as a musician and as a person. Around the end of my marching band time, I actually started writing music. I was inspired by somebody I'd marched with who was playing something on the piano, and I asked them what it was, and they said, "Oh, I wrote it." Like, you can just do that? So I started doing that, started sitting at the piano and just, cracking out some notes. Didn't necessarily sound very good, but I actually have my first piece of music I ever wrote here, if you all wanted to hear a little bit of it.
Oh, yes.
Okay, let's see if you can hear it. I clicked share sound. Nice. Thank you. I was probably 15 or so, and I started playing it on the piano, and I was like, I like this. So I went to GarageBand, my first DAW, as you could say, and punched it in, wrote a fun little bass line for it, added some strings, and was like, ship it. So it's out in the world. You can find that on my SoundCloud. It's my first piece of music, and I keep it around just to remind me where I started. So a little bit later, after I finished this cool marching band stuff, I went off to my undergrad university and I was like, I want to study music. But after writing some of this stuff, I'm like, maybe I want to write music as a career. And I got this idea of maybe I want to go into film scoring. I don't know how all these chain events led to that, why I didn't go into like marching bands writing, arranging or something. But I don't know. I was like, film scoring, that's where I want to be. So my university had this program that let you kind of combine different kind of focus areas from different degrees and create your own, as long as you had like a career in mind that you could pursue using those areas. So I combined classes from the general music area, music industry, and film, so that I could go into film scoring. My university didn't have a film scoring degree. It didn't have composition degree. It didn't have anything like that. It had some elective composition courses, but I just kind of took select classes from each of these areas to try and form a kind of film scoring degree that I could from what was available. At the end of, I was there for 3 years. I graduated early because I had a bunch of college classes in high school. I ended up marching with the Blue Stars Drum and Bugle Corps that summer. So I took my marching band adventures to the next level and marched with a world-class drum corps for one summer. And that took my music level to a whole nother level. And I walked away from that feeling like my level of musicianship had doubled what I had gotten in my 3 years of university. But if you really think about it, when you're in a drum corps, you're rehearsing every day for like 10 hours a day for 85 days straight. And that's probably more cumulative hours than I did in any of my classes. So I guess it kind of makes sense. But combined, it was just this huge upgrade to my experience, in working with other people, teamwork, making connections, and my music knowledge and musicianship and things like that. And also drum corps use sound effects. Wasn't thinking about it at the time, but that was another through line that eventually came back to me. Later, I started working with a local TV production company called True Facade Pictures, local to Mankato, Minnesota, which is close to where I was living in St. Clair. And that's actually where I primarily learned Pro Tools. I did have a class in college on it, but I didn't have the skills really necessary to do the work for True Facade. So I went on lynda.com, which I think is now LinkedIn Learning, and I watched a few tutorials on Pro Tools. One of them was like 12 hours long and the other one was like 6 hours. And I went through and I'm like, I have to figure this software out. And so that's how I learned it primarily, so that I could work on their video stuff. They were asking me to mix or edit some of their audio. I'm like, oh, all I know is GarageBand and Sibelius, and those were not what I needed. So this is how I primarily learned Pro Tools, which was my first like fully featured digital audio workstation. At the end of my final semester at MSU, I went to this workshop with a group called B302, which is a partnership with the Minnesota State University Mankato, and also they have a location in the Netherlands. And my university and their university, Han University, have this partnership where they kind of exchange students. Some of their students come here to work at a company called B507, and then we would send students over there to B302. And I went to this workshop, and at the end of it, they were like, hey, we would love for you to be an intern at B302. Would you like to do that? I'm like, yes, I would love to do that. And they said, well, part of the requirement is that you have to study here. And I said, well, this is my last year. I graduate. And they're like, well, figure it out and you can come. I'm like, okay, I'll do that. And they also required me to take some advanced film production courses, which I had not taken during my years in the 3 years I was there. So I actually went back to school that next year and took some film production courses in preparation to go to the Netherlands to do this internship. And so I registered as a student again, but not in music, and went to the Netherlands to go study at the university and work at this multimedia student-run company that was embedded within the university at Han University in Arnhem. And so I worked at this company called B302 as an intern, and then I took classes, and the classes were in game design. And it was, there it's called a minor, which is a little bit different than the minors we think of here. A minor there is a semester-long deep dive into one topic. All of your classes are designed around that topic. And so for game design, I had art 3D modeling animation classes. I had game theory and design. And then we actually had this big project where we made games. And that was considered a minor. And you would do a semester of that as part of your degree program. So while I was there at B302, I was on the audio-visual team. And I was kind of hired as like an audio engineer or the audio person for that team. And so I wrote some music, I did some sound effects, I recorded voiceover, I did general editing work on these different video projects. A lot of them were for the university or for community members or things like that. But there were a lot of videos that the community would come to us and we would put together for them. I ended up actually working on a video game at B302 that was a game designed to help facilitate difficult conversations with teachers at a school. So how do you approach certain topics and things? And the game would like facilitate those conversations. I worked on some sound effects and music for that. I did sound effects for a stop motion animated video, a logo, the B302 logo. I did a sound effect for that and other cool, fun projects. And I made some really great connections too with the people there, some of which I'm still in contact with today and reach out to occasionally. Then on the game side, I took this game minor, and the first half of the semester is when you would learn how to make games. And so we would take classes on 3D modeling. We had like 3 days where we met with a audio engineer named Bart Dykman to teach us some of the basics of game audio. And then the rest of the course was on the art and the game philosophy. How do you make a game? What is a game? What is fun? What is flow? How do you achieve these different things? And then what is a game engine? How do you work in a game engine? Things like that. Just the basics of game development. The second half of the semester, we actually took our classes and broke it into 2, and we made 2 games. One game was called Luminous, which is the game I was not on. And the other one was Tava. And on Tava, I was on the sound team. And the sound team was made up of 2 people. You can see that at the bottom of the center picture where it says our amazing team. At the bottom right, it says sound team. And there I am with my one other teammate, Vasilia. But all together, we made this game in a few months. And we did it. We were all students. The school gave us a classroom and said, this is your office. You pick your own hours. And they stopped teaching classes. But what we would do is we'd meet with them and they would just give us feedback. They became advisors. It was really cool. And it pretty accurately simulated what game development is like, which was such an awesome experience. Now that, I'm working at a game studio, like I can see how this really did set me up for success. And what was so cool about it is how interdisciplinary it was. You're on these teams made up of people of all the different crafts, and you work very closely with them. So you learn little bits and pieces of each of their crafts, and they learn a little bit about yours, so you have a better understanding of how to collaborate with each other. And really, this is the moment that I was like, I want to be in game development. I don't want to go into film scoring anymore. I really want to be embedded in these teams and working with these people of different backgrounds and crafts and techniques and ideas and concepts and working closely with these people. And that would be my dream job. So this is where I started to pivot, like maybe not film scoring anymore, maybe game music. So as part of this game team, I ended up making over 200 sound effects and a full score for the game. At the time, I was not aware of audio middleware, which if you're not familiar with is software that allows you to put sound effects into the game without needing to really know how to code. It kind of bridges that gap. So sound designers can get sound effects and music and things into the game working as intended without needing to be a programmer. Well, we didn't really know about that. So what I ended up doing was making this huge spreadsheet of all the sounds and music in the game with clear explanations of where in the game they would play, when they should play, how loud they should be, and all the different logic and things you would need to know to get it in the game. And then I sat down with the programming team and we methodically went through and put everything in there and got it working, which is not the most efficient way to do things, but it worked. So that's how we ended up doing that. And we actually ended up getting an award for our game at this showcase we did at the end of the semester. So it was such an awesome project. So here's a trailer. I'd like to play it for you so you can see what the game looked like. And the music here I wrote. So take a listen. Thank you.
That's a little step up from the GarageBand piece.
Yes. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, that was several years later, but I had come a long way at that point, I think. I actually got some nice virtual instruments, wasn't using the default GarageBand sounds anymore, learned a little bit about music theory and so on in college. So during this project, my supervisor essentially was Bart Dykman, who was a local composer and recording engineer who also worked at the university. And he took us to his studio and we recorded his friend, Laura Hadsvard, who is a friend of his. That was like, she's got a great voice. We've recorded her before. Invite her over. So we invited her and asked if maybe she would want to do the vocalizations for the character in the game too. She could be the character in this world. And she was totally down for it, so we did. So we went to Bart's studio. She recorded all of the sounds for the main character. Her name was Authley, and she sang all of the music that had vocals. And it was just this great opportunity, recording studio with a recording engineer, with a vocalist for this project, student-run project. It just all worked out so well. And then I moved back to the United States. And it's like all this exciting stuff was gone. I'm like, now what do I do? I'm not in the Netherlands anymore. I'm not on a cool game project. I'm back in the US. Well, I saw at my undergrad university that Dr. Michael Olson had shown up and started up this film scoring course at that. I'm like, they didn't offer it when I was there. Well, they're offering it now. So I actually went back to my undergrad university and took this class with Dr. Olson. And maybe some of you know him too, because he also studied at Georgia Southern with Dr. Thompson. Pretty amazing. Small world. So even though this was a film scoring class, this is actually the moment I realized I wanted to do sound design, which maybe seems strange because that had nothing to do with this course. What Dr. Olson had us do for these projects was take a scene from a movie or a cinematic from a game or just any kind of cool visual media and write music to it. And he had some durations like, oh, it needs to be a minute or it needs to be 3 minutes or something like that, but write the music. And he had some other requirements. And as I was doing that, I was writing the music, and like you strip out all the audio from the video to put the music in. Like, oh, it's missing, all the other sounds. I want, the voices and I want the sound effects. And so I actually ended up spending, we'd have 2 weeks to do this, and I would spend a week of it just redoing all the sound effects, and then the final week trying to really fast put all the music together, which is not what he probably wanted me to do, but that's what I decided I want to do. I'm like, I need the sound effects, so I spent a lot of time doing the sound effects, and this is where I started to develop an ear for what sound design is, what I could do to make cool sounds, how to use those to create evocative soundscapes. Had never really thought about it before. I did a little bit in the Netherlands on the game, but never did this deep dive. Actually, funny enough, on the game, I was like, I don't really want to do the sound effects. I just want to write the music. This is my passion. And so the sound effects were kind of my secondary thing. But here in this class, when the primary thing was supposed to be film scoring, is when I realized that I wanted to do sound effects. So actually, and during this time, this is when I switched from Pro Tools to Cubase. I got very tired of Pro Tools because it kept crashing on me. So I was like, I need a new digital audio workstation. And I trialed a whole bunch of them and decided on Cubase. Funny enough, the DAW that was taught in that class was Logic. And I was like, nah, I'm going to go home and learn on Cubase instead. So I'm very sorry, Dr. Olson. I'm a rebel, but that's what I ended up doing. So here I've got a couple of clips of actually what I did in that class. Everything you'll hear in these videos, they're not the whole videos, but everything you hear in these videos, I did all the sound effects, I did all of the music for this class in like a week or two. And I wasn't taking this for credit or anything. I just went back because I wanted to learn it because it wasn't offered when I was there. I'll play the first one here.
Very nice.
Thank you, thank you. So those were a couple of the videos I did during this class, and clearly it's still very much music focused. But you could hear that I like injected some of those sound effects in there because it wouldn't have been quite right if the sounds weren't there, you know. So I spent a lot of time doing that, and I've actually gone back since and fleshed out all of the sound design in some of these videos so that it's like full and thick and interesting without the music. So if you ever go to my website, you can go to the sound effects tab and you can find some of those videos if you're interested. But so after that class, I found this conference called Game Sound Con in Los Angeles, where a bunch of game audio folk get together and give presentations and talk and network and hang out. And I was like, I should go check that out. I'm interested in game audio stuff. And so in 2018, I flew out to Los Angeles. I actually went with my dad. I was a little spooky because I'm like, I've never gone to Los Angeles by myself before. So we went together and made the best of it. And I brought a notebook and I'm like, I'm here to learn. I'm going to go to all of the presentations that I can to get fundamental knowledge that I need to get into game audio. This is what I want to do. And so I went to these presentations. They actually had a track specifically for people who are new to game audio. So it's designed just for that. And there are other tracks you can go onto for like people who are more experienced or who are looking at experimental, new, innovative things, stuff like that. But I went down the I'm a brand new person here kind of track and just took a notebook and took notes. And I met so many incredible people there that I still talk to today. Two people I met at Game Sound Con, one at the first time I went and one at the second time, are people I work with now at Riot, pretty amazingly, on my team, like on the same team. So I learned a lot while I was there. I learned a lot about audio middleware, for example, Wise and Fmod. I learned a lot of general game sound design and music knowledge. I went to a cool presentation on game music. I went on one that's specific to sound design, sound effects, and things like that. Took lots and lots of notes. And met lots of cool people and what they were doing. And this is where I realized that really sound design is what I wanted to do rather than kind of game audio general, game music. I was like, maybe sound effects is what I should start to pursue. And for anybody here who's interested in game audio, I highly recommend going to Game Sound Con. This place opened a whole world for me. In the following slides, you'll see pretty much all of my work that I've gotten came from people that I met here or as a result of going to this conference. So after that, after Game Sound Con, what do I do? Like, well, now I need to learn. I need to develop my craft. I need to get better at everything game audio. So I decided to learn Wise, which was the kind of industry standard of audio middleware. They have a whole certification course on their website, and I went through every single one. I didn't take the tests, but like I learned all of the course materials. And I also went on YouTube and found some tutorials people had put together there and experimented with it, like make my own game, try out Wise, see how I can get it working with my own stuff. I started doing sound redesigns of some of my favorite video games. I'd find clips from League of Legends or from Metroid, and I would just redo all the sound effects and then post that on my website. I learned how to build a website and my demo reel so that I could actually start looking for work. Those are essential in this industry, having a website and a demo reel. This is where people find you. This is how people figure out what you can do, what you have done. And actually, somebody I met at Game Sound Con said, hey, you should check out this Twitch series called Real Talk, where Power Up Audio checks out people's game audio reels, analyzes them, gives them feedback, and streams this for everybody to watch, and then saves all the videos so you can go back and watch them later. And so I was going through and watching these. I'm like, oh, that's a really great idea. And you discover what to avoid, what are some pitfalls, what are some things you should really do to make yourself stand out, and how to just get better at your craft as well. Because they actually analyze the videos and give you feedback on the individual details of your reel. So I went out and I bought a Zoom H4 audio recorder so I could start building my own sound library. And also, this is just really good for everything audio. It teaches you how to listen. So you just go out into the world and you just record every sound and you think about what is it made out of? What does it sound like? And what could you do with it? And that I think actually was a foundational part of making me a good sound designer, is just learning how to listen and how to capture what you hear. I spent a lot of time learning my tools, Cubase, lots of plugins, Isotope RX, sound design techniques. I'd go online, watch tutorials, and just spent time practicing every single day, making little reels, trying out new synths, making fun sounds, just experimenting, trying things, learning. I started following sound designers online on social media. A lot of them would just post cool tricks. And I'm like, oh, I should try that. I would go open up my DAW and experiment it, make my own presets, and then save it. I'm like, now I can make this cool sound that I learned from somebody online. And I still do that today. I go on social media and find these cool tips and tricks that people share. And you go, wow, this is amazing. Tell them that they did something really cool. And then you take it and put it in your back pocket for later use. And then when other people ask you for things, you know it and you can give it to them. And so you can spread this knowledge. And something I found about the game audio community is it's filled with people who love sharing their knowledge. They love just imparting their tips and tricks onto everybody. It's just such a great community for that. The field recording community, the game audio community, there's a lot of overlap between that. So if you're really interested in sound design stuff, seek those people out. And they are so freely giving this knowledge online. And then I also joined a mentorship program where I mentored a few people on what I knew. And I actually I had a mentor also teach me some things. And this all ended up, that mentorship actually ended up helping me out with my capstone project at Georgia Southern, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And then I started looking for jobs. I'm after college. What do I do? I need to find some work. And so I found SoundLister, which is a cool website with a newsletter that sends out game audio jobs, pretty much, mostly, but audio work. You'll find a lot of audio work on there all over the world. Indeed, LinkedIn, just checking them out. And then I would look at their job applications and see what their requirements were. It's like, what do I need to know? And you go look through that and you're like, oh, those are the things I need to know. And then you go learn those things. And so that's what I started doing. One of the people I met at GameSoundCon, who I actually work with now, was like, hey, there's this composer that I used to work with. Like, I was his sound designer and he was my composer. You know, we had this partnership, but that guy actually went over to Riot. And so he's like, this composer needs a sound designer now. And they connected me to this game called Fatal Core, which was an online trading card game. But you can still play it. It's on Steam. And there's also a browser version. And I started creating sound effects for them. And I was doing that up until about the time it was released in 2021. But it was kind of on and off nearing the end of that because I started going to grad school, I think, in 2020. But once I started working on Fatal Core, it was like a domino effect. Once I had one gig and something to show, the next one came and the next one came and the next one came. And you make connections with people and they're like, hey, I worked with this cool guy named Andrew, and he did a good job on this project. Why don't you work on that project? And people start connecting you all over the place. So that same composer who I worked with on Fatal Core connected me with somebody at Sheridan College in Canada, where they had this really great animation program. And I was going to work on the sound design for an animated short film. Well, I ended up, I don't remember what exactly happened, but they ended up not needing my help. But they said, but I have this other friend who's also doing an animated short film. Maybe you want to do that one. It's like, okay. So I ended up hopping over to a different animated short film. And through that, I got another animated short film and another animated short film. I ended up working on 3 or 4, I think, all from different students at that school because they were just passing my name around, which is pretty amazing. And I ended up working on several video games. And also I got connected with a group called Materia, where I ended up working on a track for this album called Vessel that you can see on the right side. And I figure through them, I also ended up working on Horns of Hyrule. The arranger, Daniel Romberger, reached out to me and said, hey, I know you play euphonium, want to play on this album, Horns of Hyrule? I was like, how do you know about me? I actually don't know for sure, but I think it's because of Materia. But ended up playing on a couple tracks of that, and I actually recorded those while I was at Georgia Southern. I'm sure Dr. Thompson witnessed me going into the studio for hours on end to just get my chops back on that euphonium. And then I also started doing sound design for some marching groups. I did some sound effects for a drum and bugle corps, and I did some sound effects for an indoor drum line. And then I also started editing videos for marching bands, and then later for some other groups, wind ensemble and orchestra and choir. So I was just doing all this cool audio work from all over the place. Some of it was game related, some of it wasn't, but all of it built my skills. So I worked on this animated short film called Inflated. I'll play just about a minute of it. But I ended up with my recorder recording all these sounds for this video. Almost all of it was recorded by me. There are a few sound effects in there that I bought, but almost all of it. And you'll see that almost all of it was balloons. So take a listen. Okay, so that was just the beginning, but if you're interested in watching it, you can check it out on Vimeo and watch the whole thing. But it was me in my basement with a bag of balloons and just filling them up and making weird balloon noises, and I probably have like 200 gigabytes of weird balloon sounds that I made for this video. But I still have them in case I need them, you know? Save everything. But that was just so much fun, and that's where, you know, I realized how much fun sound design could really be. I didn't write any of the music in this. It was by Felix, here you can see on the screen. And I just did the sound effects, and I also did the voices. So that was me making the little kid and the old guy with the balloon. So then I went to grad school. I went to Georgia Southern University in 2020. It was actually kind of a twist of fate. One of my classmates from undergrad named Ryan, who was in that film scoring class with me, reached out and said, "Hey, Andrew, I think you'd be really good at this university. You should apply. Also, if you apply today, the application fee is waived, so go for it. And tomorrow it's back to full price." And I was like, "Oh, I got to go do this now." And so I was like, typed up my computer that night, submitted all my applications real fast, and was like, "We'll see what happens." And lo and behold, I was accepted. Somehow, I guess I convinced Dr. Thompson in some way. And so while I was there, I was a graduate assistant the first year. And I managed the studios in the tech lab and worked in the music library. And then the second year, I was a graduate teaching assistant, and I taught digital audio workstations and the introduction to music technology classes. I studied with both Dr. Thompson and Dr. Harwood, who are both amazing, as I'm sure you all know. And this program really opened my mind just to the whole world of audio. I thought I knew things, and then I got here and I was like, I don't know anything. Check this out. And it just blew my mind. And just revolutionized the way I thought about audio. And I think as much as, you know, people may say you don't need to go to school to get into sound design or video games, this changed my whole perspective on things. And I'd like to say that it totally helped me get to where I am now. And it still helps me today, the things I learned. Also, at the start of this semester, I switched from Cubase to Reaper, so my next DAW change. And this was fueled because we didn't have Cubase at the university, and Reaper was free, so I was like, maybe I can make that work. And also, Reaper was known as like the digital audio workstation for game development. So I'm like, well, if I'm going into game design, it's time for me to learn that one. So I spent like 2 weeks at the very start of the semester figuring that out, just teaching myself, going online and just experimenting, and now it's my main one. This is what I use. So while I was at Georgia Southern, I made some cool projects. Some of them were a little silly, some of them were a little complicated, but this was my midterm project in my first class, the first Max class, where I hooked up an Xbox controller and used it to create music. And it would also draw kind of art on these LCD screens. And it like started out from this project where we had to print a circle, and I struggled so much with that. I like could not figure out how to do it. But when I did figure out, I'm like, I need to make this into my midterm project. So that's what I did. So take a listen. cool. So I had like different buttons control different things, either the pitch or the type of scale, or if it suddenly plays some tritones just to add some dissonance or something. You know, some variety and some bass drum hits, like whatever. Change the color, cool. But it was a fun project just to see what I could do with that. It also kind of felt like a video game. You know, you're playing with these controllers and you're making music, and who knows what's going to happen. It's not very precise, but that was kind of the fun of it. And then I did my capstone project, and how anyone can grade this mess is beyond me. So I'm very sorry, Dr. Thompson, you had to look at this. Or maybe you didn't have to look at it, and you're just like, I trust Andrew knew what he was doing in the back end. But this is what the code looked like for the most part. Some of these things had like code within the code. It was a big mess, I'm sorry. But this was my capstone project. And what it ended up looking like when you're not looking underneath the hood was this sound library explorer. And I was trying to think for my capstone project, what's something that would be useful for the career I want in game audio? And I thought, well, it'd be cool to have a tool that let you search for sounds in a new and innovative way. And the current way you do it is by searching through name and metadata for the most part. You're like, I want a water drop sound, and you type water drop, and you get sounds that have water drop in the metadata or in the name, or maybe words that are similar to that. But what if you want a sound that sounds like a water drop but isn't a water drop, and nobody included that in the metadata, right? How do you find it? So I made this tool that actually analyzes the sounds and then groups them in this scatter plot based on what they sound like. So you could like scrub through the sounds and hear them, and you may find sounds that sound similar to each other but aren't like the same object or thing. So I'll play you a little demonstration of this. So maybe not very exciting. And it was very complicated and took a lot of time.
I think
But
that's
what it's
very
doing,
exciting, personally.
I'm glad you like it, Dr. Thompson. But what it did was it grouped these sounds based on sonic similarities. See, all those different points are segments of different sounds, and using machine learning, grouped them together. Then you could click it, listen to it, and then drag it into your digital audio workstation to use as a sound effect. And so it's a whole new way of exploring your sound library, which was the idea behind it. So after Georgia Southern, I'm back out of school, right? Wrong. Before I finished my semester, I applied for a job at Riot Games. It was in the last few months. I don't remember exactly which month it was, but I was like, I'm going to give it one more try. I'd applied to Riot and a few other companies several times up until this point. I'm like, why not? I'll give it a go. So I applied to Riot Games and I got the job. And it was a pretty thorough set of interviews. I had to do a sound design test, lots of stuff. But I had the tools now. After all this time, after what I had at Georgia Southern, I was ready to do this. And actually, my capstone project was of interest of several people when I was going through these interviews. And people still reach out to me and talk about it today, which is super cool. So I asked Riot, can I get my degree before having to go out there? And they said, yes, that's okay. You can finish your last few months, get your degree, and then you can come out and start work. So that's what I did. I finished the program at Georgia Southern and graduated, and drove back to Minnesota. It's like a 20-something hour drive with all my stuff to get all my stuff all together, and then went to California to go live by the studio. So some things I've done at Riot so far, I've worked on quite a few projects, and others are not out yet, but some that are currently out. My first skin I worked on, so I was on the cosmetics team where I would make kind of alternate appearances for characters and do all the sound effects. My first one was this one called Bewitching LeBlanc, which was like a Halloween themed skin, so witches and pumpkins and bats and things. My second skin I worked on was Winter Blessed Swain, which was this kind of Aurora Borealis magic winter themed skin that came out around Christmas, but a little bit more serious and fantasy based rather than kind of holiday feeling. And then I worked on Ari's ASU. ASU stands for Art and Sustainability Update, where we go take an existing character and all of their skins, all the content made for them, and update them so that they're more sustainable and for future work. So League of Legends is a pretty old game. It's been around for a long time. So some content was made years and years and years ago. And so we're taking that content and making it so as if it were made today, I guess. And so it's easy to make new content moving forward. Because League of Legends is a game that's always going, always new content. It's not like you ship it in 2 years and the game is done and then you make a new game, you know, the next in the series and the next in the series. The game's just ongoing, always alive, always continuing. And then I worked on Tournament of Souls, which was a game within the League of Legends client that was for the Soul Fighter event, which was a big event we did this summer. And I made all of the user interface sounds for that. And if you're really interested in League of Legends sound design and audio work, they actually did a whole series on YouTube called League Frequencies. And so if you're interested, I recommend going and watching through those and learning about what we do, what our philosophies are, how we think about things, how we achieve those things. And it's really, really quite interesting. They've got videos on how to make and craft like sound building blocks to create other sounds, just kind of fundamentals of our philosophy and things like that. So totally worth checking out. So I work here now, and oops. Do you want to watch any of these videos? Hear some of my sound design? Is that a yes or no?
We heard yes. Yes,
okay.
Please. Yeah.
Let's jump around. Let's play a little bit of LeBlanc. This was my first skin ever. Let's back it up.
Patience, summoner.
Yeah, so that was LeBlanc. Let's see if I can get this video. So these are characters in the game League of Legends. They have a set of 4 spells that they can use. The first thing you saw was actually the recall, which is kind of an ability that lets you teleport back to the starting your base. So if you're like in the middle of the game, you can go all the way back. And so you have this cool little animation as you return to base. And then the other ones are spells. And this champion's kind of, they're all unique. But what this champion does is her 4th spell lets her recast her other spells, and then they have like a color variation. So a lot of her spells end up looking kind of similar because you're recasting. You know, you have your first ability, and then you use your 4th ability, and it's the same as your first ability, but it's a different color. But I added in these sprinkles of different sound effects to give it kind of a different character. So you probably saw when she sent out that kind of tether, there was an evil laugh on the second cast to kind of show off that it's the alternate version of this spell. I'll play the second one here, which is Winter Blessed Swain. His base character, like the champion as he is without his skins, is like this general of this big Noxus army, and he's kind of this spooky guy with a crow. on his shoulder, and I had to make him sound like this Aurora Borealis kind of mystical man. So take a listen, see how I kind of blended the two, make him still sound like this elegant, big general, but made him sound in this magical wonderland world. Let's start with the recall.
Some say the darkness is back because they cannot see me. Pity stays the hand of the merciful, but not mine.
Yeah, so that one had like hints of, thank you, hints of that Aurora Borealis magic, and like, what does the Aurora Borealis sound like? That's the question. It doesn't have sounds, but we tried to find what it would sound like, right? Mixed with kind of icy winds and crystally icy sounds and ice and things like that, to kind of, and some gold kind of magic, because he's got like this gold armor and gold things in his spells, figuring out what that sounds like and putting it all together to make him sound the way he does. And then this Ari one, I didn't actually do much of the sound design for this one. I came in late on this project, but I ended up doing the kind of final touches. So I probably won't play the video because it's really, really long, but that's a project I worked on. And I don't have any of the videos for Tournament of Souls, but you might be able to find some videos on YouTube if you hop in and know that any of the button clicks were things that I worked on. So that's the end of my presentation. That was my journey into game audio, and I'd love to know if any of you have any questions.
Thank you, Andrew. If any of you do have questions, we have a microphone down here, so for the recording, we'd be able to hear your question. Does anybody have a question? Josh does. Josh? Here he comes down. The price is right. This one over here, right? Can someone switch the camera so that we can look at Josh? Well, I can barely see him, but all right. Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi, nice to see you again, Andrew. Is there are there any sound clips that you find yourself like falling back on? Like, do you have like favorites, or are you always changing up the type of sounds that you use?
Are you asking like, do I have favorite sound effects that are like my go-to, or like things that I worked on?
Any go-to bass sound effects, or
not really. So actually, interestingly, I did before Riot, because I had my own personal collection, and then at Riot I have Riot's collection, and so I'm kind of developing or in discovering what would be kind of my go-to things. But really, the idea is never to just use the exact same things. It's smart to go and find like some, listen through your library, find some sounds that you're like, I know these are good and these are good for these moments. But I wouldn't rely on those as being like your end all be all. You can use those as starting points, and then you build new sounds from there. And something we do, and I did this before Riot, didn't have a name for it, but what we call building blocks, where you craft the foundational sounds first, and then you use those to make the sound effects that you make later. And so you can say, for example, you've got this winter blessed skin. You're like, oh, I need sounds for this skin. You go off and you make Aurora Borealis sounds. You make icy sounds. You make these different things that you think would fit that character, maybe based on some art that you found online or just concepts. you create your foundational sounds, and then you use those when you're crafting the final project. So those become your go-to sounds, but you make them rather than them being just something that was in your library from the start. So you kind of create them for each project as you go along.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew Grabowska. We have to end. We have another class coming in. Really appreciate
No,
your
I'm
time.
sorry.
It's very, very nice to hear from you and see you again. I'm sure Andrew would be happy to hear from you via email if you have additional questions. He's an approachable person. And again, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Andrew.
See ya. Yes, please reach out, and thanks for inviting me.